Welcome to Books and Brews Light. We are on episode number 41 with Tara Hodgson. Welcome, Tara. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
It's nice to see you. We've
Yeah.
had a lot going on here, so I'm getting back into our Books and Brews Light section. In fact, I was almost late today because we're having our bathroom torn apart. And
Okay.
so my clothes are everywhere. I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
find anything. It's going to be an interesting few weeks until
Yeah.
that's done. I've
We're
never
actually in
had
renos too. So we're
you're
in the
doing this
middle.
too?
Yeah, well, not bathroom. We actually are redoing our whole basement. So our life is in
Okay.
shambles. If you can hear any banging, I think the headphones can block it out, but there are people working on my basement right now. It's like thunk, thunk, thunk.
That's funny. I had gone in just about an hour and a half ago, and I wanted to check with our contractor when she was leaving, and I was hoping she could stay all night, get a lot of work done, so I didn't want
Yeah.
to feel like I was pushing her out the door.
Mhm.
But she was also just cleaning and packing up till about 10 minutes before we started, and
Yeah.
so otherwise we might have had joined banging and
Yes.
pounding on the walls
Yeah. Well,
going
gotta get
on.
done.
So, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and about your book.
Yeah, so I first and foremost, I describe myself as a teacher because I have been a teacher for 17 years now. And I've always taught junior high school. So that is why I wrote a young adult book. And it was really inspired by experience that I've had as a teacher, especially in the last 10 years. The book is called Chasing Through Time. And the whole premise is how social media has such a significant influence on teens today.
Right. And I'm sure that you have seen an awful lot of that in the schools.
Yeah, it's wild actually. Just even, 10 years, how much has changed for kids. It's quite drastic.
Right. Well, I was teaching music lessons up until just maybe about 3 years ago when we started our farm, and now I do that instead. But even teaching one-on-one, I saw a lot of that. I was kind of torn about the pros and cons. So, for instance, there was one little girl. Um, it was a very difficult family situation in which her mother, for very good reasons, became a single mother. And so this little girl at the age of 6 had her phone. So she always had that lifeline and that ability. And her mom would drop her off for lessons at the community center. But if anything held her up, her daughter always had that phone. And yet she was only 6.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the pros and cons that you have seen with this increase in everybody having a phone?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. And my book does highlight pros and cons as well. But I guess, yes, pros, the connection piece in some ways is significant. However, I also think that while sure it might be a connection piece, it's also a very disconnecting piece as well, because as kids become more dependent on their phones, they disconnect from their real world and are just so absorbed by, this little phone, that this world in their back pocket.
Right.
I see a lot of mental health issues creeping in. Like it's the difference from 10 years ago when I was teaching to now, the anxiety, I think maybe because they need to be connected all the time. They can never escape, some of those things. When I was in junior high and high school, I didn't have a cell phone, and you could go home at the end of the day. And even if you had a terrible day, you could completely disconnect from that day and just be at home. Kids don't have that opportunity anymore. It follows them. And in fact, I would say most of the issues that we deal with at school is stuff that's happening on phones outside of school and how it
Mhm.
trickles into, their day-to-day lives. So the premise of the book, it actually follows two girls, and one girl is growing up in 2001. So kind of based on my experiences, no social media, no cell phones. And then my second protagonist is growing up in 2022, and just, how there are a lot of similarities in their struggles, but there's so many differences as well, just with that added challenge of the social media piece.
Right. And it's funny that you call social media the added challenge.
Mhm.
In so many ways, it's wonderful. Yeah, I grew up in the military, so for me to be able to connect with all these people I knew in the past, we're a very mobile society. It's such a great thing. And yet, you're right. It's
Mhm.
also a hindrance.
Yeah. Well,
And
I think as an adult, we use it a lot differently than kids do as well. So they're not necessarily looking at it as a way to connect with people. They're looking at it as a way to escape reality. So they are completely zoning out and just that, like I've actually watched kids just film over at the eyes and just sit there in a trance. Scroll, 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 scroll. You know, they're not connecting at that point. They're actually disconnecting because there's people around them at that moment in time and they're not talking to them. Instead, they're completely absorbed by their device.
I'm curious, do you think some of the difference is that they grew up with it and adults, especially older adults, didn't? Is that part of why we use it differently?
Potentially. I think that's probably part of it, but also just, as an adult, we might recognize more, oh, I've been scrolling for too long, like we more filter ourselves, whereas they don't. Our brains are different. And they just, yeah, I know as a kid, you get lost in a television. Like I would watch hours and hours of television.
Mhm.
You don't think about the repercussions of that at the time.
Right. Yeah. So you have a reading ready.
I do. I have a couple, but I think I've settled on one. There are a couple of swear words, but I can filter them
Okay.
if I need, or
It,
does it
it's
matter?
best to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you
Okay.
can, that would be great.
Perfect. I definitely, like, as somebody who's surrounded by teenagers all the time, I tried to write and speak the way that teenagers would.
Mhm.
So I will change my words.
Okay.
All right. So this is from the one girl's point of view. Her name is Emma, and she lives in 2022. So I chose the more current point of view. My room wraps its arms around me as soon as I enter. Band posters suffocate the paint on the walls, old familiar faces after a day full of strangers. A pile of pillows beckons me to bed, a safe place in a sea full of danger. I lie down sideways on the bed, the tiredness and heaviness of my body hitting me like a truck. Just lifting my phone to a line in front of my face exhausts me. I don't want to know. I don't want to see, but I can't bring myself to look away. The violation of words will not end. What a cow. Did she think Preston would actually like this? She's dumber than I thought. She looks better covered up. I reported the photo to Instagram 3 days ago, and there it still sits, a mistake permanently etched onto my skin like a regretted tattoo. Me, black lace, red lips. I close my eyes and hurl the weapon onto the floor. I wish it would just shatter. I wish it would just crumble into millions of tiny, minuscule pieces. The phone, the comments, the photo, all of it. Instead, it buzzes again on the ground, taunting me. I curl onto my side, tears infiltrating my eyes, vision clouding like frost icing the window. I suddenly feel too stuffy, too hot, too trapped. I jump up and begin pacing the short length of my room. I count my breaths, inhaling to 5, exhaling to 5. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Except it's not working. It always works, but it's not working. Inhale, exhale. Balloon fills, balloon empties. A cold sweat covers my skin like a sheet. I need to get out of this room and escape the claustrophobia that's strangling my throat. My only true haven suddenly feels like hell. I hesitate in front of my phone. I should leave it. I need a break. But knowing and doing are two very different things. I grab it desperately, jabbing the side button to silent, and tuck it into the waistband of my black leggings. I crack my door open, peering from side to side to make sure my dad is still situated in the living room, nursing another can of Budweiser while watching the hockey game and playing games on his phone. I tiptoe into the dimly lit hallway, photos of a younger, happier me scrutinizing me from both sides. My feet glide along the hardwood floor, skipping over the boards I know will protest beneath my steps. The stairway is dark. My heart hammers in my chest, sweat pooling at the back of my neck. I need to cool down. I need space to process and escape from the noxious device burning into the skin of my right hip. The basement. It's the only thing I can think of outside being too bitterly cold on a winter January night. The light from the television drifts eerily into the hallway beside the living room. I hold my breath at the bottom of the stairs and jog to the other side of the entrance, praying that my presence goes unnoticed. I don't know why I'm so concerned. They never notice me anyways. But it seems important that this continue until I recollect myself. My back rests against the wall, and when I'm sure he remains oblivious, temporary relief surges through me and I continue my trek downstairs. I submerge into the pitch darkness that beckons from the basement, the sudden change in temperature evaporating the sweat that's collected on my skin. I feel a sense of reprieve and my breathing steadies. Another panic attack. That's what my therapist would say just happened. I hear her raspy voice echo in my mind. A sudden episode of intense fear that triggers physical reactions when there's no real apparent cause. Except I'm pretty sure I know the cause of mine. They've been happening more often since the picture was posted, but started a couple of months ago when Ella and Preston decided to ruin my life. Sweat swimming all over me, breathing out of control, and sudden claustrophobia.
That's great. Yeah. Was the other reading from the other character's perspective?
I think all the ones I kind of played around with were from Emma's because I just feel like it's more prevalent.
Okay.
Oh, I do have one here actually from Sarah. Sarah's from 2001.
Yeah, I would love to hear that one, but
Sure.
before you read it, why did you choose time travel to tell this story?
Yeah. My reason for doing that was to highlight, just like to show how different the teenage experience has become. So by alternating points of view throughout, it's like you're seeing those stark differences.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the goal.
And I think that's powerful. I mean, when I think I was in high school in the 80s, my parents were in high school in the 50s, but in a lot of ways, maybe it wasn't that different, whereas the difference from the 80s to now is huge.
It is huge, but I definitely show there's still so many similarities too, especially like, teenage girls. I feel like there's this common set of, issues that we all travel through, the insecurity, the body image, the friend issues, like that social hierarchy,
Right.
Where girls are just trying to get to the top of that ladder at no matter the cost, the mean girls, all of that stuff.
Right.
So you see, like, those are just very universal things that people experience regardless of the time. Probably in the 50s as well, there were those same issues.
Right. I'm sure there were. I was, I think, so wrapped up in music. I had my female friends. I played trombone, so I was kind of with the guys of whom I was terrified. I never really got into that mean girls thing. I really wasn't bothered too much by that sort of thing, but then I moved all the time anyway. So,
there you go.
Didn't matter. My attitude was I'm going to be gone in a couple years anyway. So, don't waste your energy. But
that's a good attitude to have.
It's an interesting different set. I've talked to a lot of authors who grew up in the military, and I think there are some interesting aspects to that. But how do these two girls connect across 20 years?
So basically, Sarah, because she's in 2001, she's got MSN Messenger. I don't know if you're familiar. It was very early form of online chatting that I used to use very rarely because we had dial-up internet, so it would take way too long.
I remember that.
But that was like the earliest form of, that communicating online. And Emma, her dad is very nostalgic, and he has this old clunky desktop computer in the basement, and there's a massive snowstorm, and somehow their computers cross wires and they are connected through time. Yeah, they live in the same place, go to the same high school. They actually live down the road from each other, in like not at the same time, but it all kind of falls into place.
Okay. And I'm just curious, since presumably Sarah is still alive and well, do they ever meet in person? Does she meet the older Sarah?
Yeah, that will have to, that's part of the story. You'd have to read and see.
Okay. Darn. Okay. Go ahead and read Sarah's story. I'm excited to hear this.
So this is Sarah basically right after her and Emma first cross paths. I finally escape my dad's clutches for a moment and make my way to the basement. After a morning full of pitiful stares from my mom and lame jokes from him, I relish in the quiet. The computer is still on, its presence beckoning me all morning. I click on the chat bar to find last night's conversation still intact. It feels like it was a dream, but here's the evidence sitting right in front of my face. MM 2022's name is still here, but there is no light indicating that she's online. What day is it in 2022? Is it a school day? Is the time the same? I have so many questions now that the actuality of what I found begins to set in. I write a simple message to leave for her if and when we are able to connect again. Emma McCoy, are you real? Did last night actually happen? I woke up this morning and my memory was fuzzy. It feels like when you're a little kid and your parents wake you up in the middle of the night if you fell asleep somewhere that isn't your bed. And so in the morning, you have to check that it actually happened. So if you're having trouble believing this like I am, Sarah Salson here, checking in from 2001. I really liked talking to you last night and I hope we can connect again. Hope your day in 2022 is amazing. It was real. The conversation we had last night was one of the most authentic conversations I've ever had. I can still feel the sadness that seeped out of her words floating in the air around me. I can feel the similarities of a life 21 years in the future. I can feel the differences too. I exhale slowly and realize that I can't stay here and wait all day, crushing my mother's hopes and dreams once again. I minimize the chat bar, but leave the computer on. I'm afraid that if I turn it off, the connection will be lost. And how could I get it back again? I climb back upstairs, yelling out into the space before I exit. I'm going to meet Emma in town, grabbing some lunch and books at the library. The lies fall easily from my lips, and even though I know they are lies, the feelings they evoke wrap me in comfort. Saturdays used to be my days with Danny. We would alternate whose house we settled in for the day, and through the night, our friendship is constant as the sun. Her house became my own, a mattress on the floor beside her bed, a permanent fixture over the past 2 years. My mom became her confidant when her parents went through their divorce, her staying here expected and welcome throughout the entire year. But the past 3 months have seen my Saturdays spent on my own, loneliness sinking into my body like a stone. The heaviness weighs upon my shoulders now as I wrap my turquoise winter jacket tightly around my body, the faux fur hood rubbing against my skin. Breath coils in front of my face like smoke as I begin the trek through our back field to connect to the gravel road that will take me into town. Our town is small, most of the students at our school residing on acreages outside of the town center. We're lucky because we have the space and privacy of a rural acreage, but just a short walk from Main Street. My body knows the journey by heart, my feet carving into the familiar path through the winter field. Frost covers the trees and the silence is broken only by my boots breaking through the crunchy surface of the snow. The top of the red brick library calls out to me through the winter chill. My imagination drifts momentarily and I fantasize about actually meeting a friend there today. Chatting with Emma last night has only heightened my solitude. I think of Margot and her inherent friendship with Amanda. Will their friendship survive the journey through high school? Could their friendship survive a Jessica Zanson?
Very nice.
Yeah.
I think this is a great story and a great idea of comparing and contrasting like this. Now, I was thinking as you were reading, is too much screen time damaging mostly for the social media, or does it also have to do with inherent things like, for instance, blue light, the computer light will make it hard for us to sleep? Are there other reasons too?
Yeah, I think the social media piece has a lot to do with, what they're exposed to. First of all, the quick videos too, like as a teacher, just the attention spans that kids have are non-existent. I feel like as a teacher, I've had to become more of a performer now than an actual educator because just maintaining their attention is nearly impossible. The stuff that they are being exposed to is extremely alarming. And this is based on conversations I have had with kids. For instance, like for a group of young girls, they have told me it is normal to receive inappropriate photos on a daily basis, like fully inappropriate. The average age of porn exposure is 9 years old now,
Oh my
which
gosh.
is damaging, so damaging to the brain. And I think it's a whole. You can put as many parental guidance measures on it as possible, but one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And before they know it, they've come across, all these things. The blue
Right.
light for sure affects sleep, but also like some parents just let their kids have their phones all night. So I think of
Hmm.
myself as a teenager, even like, the landline, I would sneak
Right.
down and talk on the phone till 2 o'clock in the morning,
Uh-huh.
which now I'm like, absolutely not. I need to go to bed.
Well, I know somebody who as a teenager ran into this. It's the daughter of a friend of mine. And she ended up, the parents only found out later that she was up half the night because
Yep.
she had a lot of friends who just needed a lot of hand holding. And again, I think that's part of our day and age, that they had all these questions about themselves and this stress and this anxiety and these worries. And they would call her and they would text her. They would be texting her all night
Mm-hmm.
long. And so she wasn't getting enough sleep, not by far. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, when we had to run down and talk on a phone connected to the wall,
Yeah.
and you have to talk, it's a whole lot harder to
Yes,
hide it. But
exactly.
imagine being a parent today and finding out your kid has been up half the night texting it and you
Mm-hmm.
don't see it, you don't hear it,
Yep.
unless you keep checking their room.
Yep.
So that jumped out to me as a major way that, and that's only one thing.
Yes. Well, and often the stuff that's happening late at night is not good stuff.
That
Like
too.
we've had a grade 5 girl, this was years ago, but it came out at school that she was on TikTok telling another girl that she should go commit suicide.
Hmm.
Like this is not good. Like, so that girl, through no fault of her own, is now being told to do that at 2,
Right.
3 o'clock in the morning. Like, if we're
Well,
just opening up a can of worms here, kids can't
right.
deal with it. They don't have the wherewithal to deal with that.
Right. And I think even that separation of the screen,
Yes.
I've been seeing this for 25 years, that people will say to you on forums what they would never say to
Hmm.
your face. They would
Absolutely.
never say it, especially when they have the usernames, and
Hmm.
they'll say any horrible, nasty thing. And we've lost that sense of connection of, are you really going to say it to someone's face when everybody sees you and knows who you are saying it?
Exactly. And yeah, again, kids just don't, they're they don't have the capacity to understand those things
Mhm.
necessarily the way that we do.
What has the response to your book been like?
It's been really positive, and actually, like, it started out as a YA book, but I find that actually it's a lot of adults who have connected with it and reached out and given me fantastic reviews. I think because the two timelines, a lot of, people my age really connect with the one girl. It's a little bit nostalgic. I tried to
Mhm.
include some of the fashion and like how are kids talking. But also like lots of parents have really connected with it. And my whole goal of writing the book was to encourage some difficult conversations about what's
Mhm.
going on. Like, what are you seeing on there? Why are you so connected to it? What would happen if we
Right,
took it away? Like, what's going on?
right.
Hmm.
Even as an adult, I find that, and I'm pretty sure I probably had ADHD anyway, but I always need to be multitasking.
Hmm.
And that's something that even as an adult, I have to say, I don't need to be playing this mindless game while
Exactly.
I'm listening to my husband. And my brain does like to be doing 10 things at once, but
Hmm.
it's a bad habit.
Yeah.
And
And actually, the book shows like it's not just kids who are affected by this, it's adults too. And actually, like Emma, the girl in 2022, her parents are very much absorbed on their devices as well. And it creates a fracture in their family.
right. And
Hmm.
I saw that even in the little scene you read, and it
Yeah.
made me really glad. When my kids were still at home, we just never had phones at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And so at least I got that right.
Hmm.
But what would your answer be? I mean, people are so attached to their phones. Parents often do see it as a safety issue that their
Hmm.
kids can contact them. How would you combat this? I mean,
Yeah.
you have a lot of experience dealing with it as a
Hmm.
teacher.
Well, and I'm a parent too, so my kids are
Mhm.
young. Well, although my son's turning 10 and many of his classmates already have smartphones.
Mhm.
And he already knows. He's like, oh, mom is not, she writes books and goes on podcasts to talk about this. So I know it's not happening.
Right.
I think I read, have you heard of Jonathan Haidt? He wrote The Anxious Generation.
I
It's,
don't think
yeah,
so.
it's blowing up right now. And it's all about how smartphones and this like move towards a screen childhood rather than a play-based childhood is really like created this crisis in mental health for kids. And his whole idea is we overprotect kids in the real world and we underprotect them online. So a lot of parents use the phone as like, this is for safety. But if you're saying it's for safety, then you need to put boundaries on that phone, because then we're not concerned about safety. We're letting kids access explicit material easily, and just see things that are way beyond what their brains can handle. So I think of myself as a parent when my child, is going out to his friend's house and, getting a little bit further away from me, I'm getting a flip phone. So they're making a comeback. So then I can be connected to him. He can text with his friends. He can call his friends, but he does not need the world at his fingertips.
Right.
Yeah, he can go on my computer in the family room like we used to do. We had a computer,
Right.
in a centralized place. And he can do all of those things, but he does not need to access all of that information. His brain is not ready to handle it.
It makes me really glad that smartphones weren't quite the big thing yet when my kids were growing
Yeah.
up. We didn't have a cell phone. It's funny, it's so long ago now, but I think we only got our first cell phone in 2006 when we were
Yeah.
making a cross-country trip. And we piled our 9 kids and our nephew into our big van, and we made this fantastic trip, over to Niagara Falls and Gettysburg and down to, was it Newport News, Virginia, and back up across Kentucky to Minnesota. I'm in Tennessee now, but we were in Minnesota at the time. And we got, just for the parents, a cell phone in case we broke down on the road. We didn't want to be sitting there on a dark highway with 10 kids. To be able to work on getting hotel reservations if something went wrong, to contact all the people we were visiting. And see, to me, this is one of the upsides of all the social media. I used to be on a twins forum, and so I had made some really good friends, and that was part of our trip, was to visit all these parents of twins and triplets that I knew.
Yeah.
And and maybe that brings up the question, how as a society can we get back to the good that this technology offers us?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's a big challenge. I think like right now parents feel a lot of pressure. And even myself as a parent, I know that pressure is going to increase because, when your kid is the only one who isn't getting these things, you just feel that inherent pressure. I think if as a community people come together and just prioritize different things, like let's get kids back outside, let's get kids exploring, and they might get hurt, that's okay. Like they might break an arm, or let them go climb trees and all those things that kids are supposed to do. I think that's where we got to go. Kids who are 10 should not be watching influencers with their makeup and skincare routines. That's not necessary. We're taking away their childhood from them.
Right. Speaking as a parent, I think one of my frustrations with that was so many of the mothers are out working that the kids are in daycare or after school programs. And so it seemed like a lot of times my kids were the only ones at home in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in my case, I had enough kids they could go out and play together.
Yes.
But what do you do if you're in that situation and you've only got 1 or 2 kids and they don't have anyone to play with?
I only have the 2 kids, and they make do, and they're bored sometimes, but boredom is so important. I tell them, like, that's good. I'm glad you're bored. You're supposed to be bored. And then eventually they find something to do, and they make up a game, they start coloring or building a craft or whatever it is. I think we're so scared to let kids be bored, which as a teacher, like, we need kids to be bored sometimes. Not everything is going to be exciting. That's okay.
Well, you know, when you were talking before about feeling like you had to be more of a performer as a teacher,
Mhm.
this is going a long way back, but I got my master's in education.
Yeah.
I believe in 2001, right, because I was pregnant with my twins when I got that. And if I remember correctly, I swear they basically told us you need to be entertaining to these kids.
Mhm.
And it wasn't, I don't think they worded it quite that, let's say, crassly, but we were really kind of told that it's your job to hold their
Mhm.
attention without, and even at the time I thought, look back to the schools, say, of the Greeks, or even much more recently, where they have the stern headmaster, and it's like, I'm not here to entertain you, I'm here to
Mhm.
teach you. And your job is to focus, and I'm going to slap the ruler on the desk and get your attention if you're
Mhm.
not focused. And I think what you're saying is we need to get at least a little bit way back to that.
Yeah, a little bit. I do think like, yeah, we have a responsibility to try and engage them in the material and connect it to their lives and make it relevant. Sure. But it's so much harder to maintain their attention now when they're used to getting their information in 15 to 20-second intervals with flashing lights and sounds and all of these, stimuli. The people who create social media are the same people who create VLTs. So how am I supposed to compete with that? So yes, I absolutely think we need to try and engage kids in the material, but there are sometimes like you have to know how to write a business email. I'm in Alberta, so that's part of our
Mhm.
curriculum. That is also something you're going to use in real life. Is it super exciting to write a business email? No, but you have to do it. So there are
Right,
times where you gotta suck it up. And when you have a job, there are parts of your job that are not going to be that overly exciting. That's okay. How do you have the grit to work through that?
right, right.
Hmm.
Something I was in music, so I spent a lot of time doing scales and,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So, how was your writing journey? Had you ever written stories before, or what did you do to learn the writing craft?
I've always loved writing. My auntie was a professional writer. And so I always kind of grew up with that. I remember her always sending her books to us, and I'd get a signed copy, and I always thought it was really cool. And I would write little chapter books when I was a kid, and I love reading. I've always been a voracious reader, and I just stopped writing for pleasure somewhere along the way. I think, with
Mhm,
school, and then, oh, I'm becoming a teacher. So I just went into teaching, and I just didn't do it anymore. And
mhm.
then I don't know, the whole social media thing, it was just, I'm very passionate about it. I'm like, how do I get this out here in a totally different way? And I read YA all the time. And like, there's
Mhm.
nothing out there that really touches on this. And phones are so central in these kids' lives. It only makes sense that we have some fiction that explores this. And so I went for a walk, and this story literally just came to me, and I was like, I'm just going to do it. I didn't tell anybody, and I just started, and it just kind of flew out of me.
And what about the publishing process?
Yeah. So I went through a company called Friesen Press in Canada. And they helped me self-publish. So they set me up with, well, my friend is an editor, so I have a kind of editor with me along the way,
Mhm.
but they set me up with a graphic designer and a formatter and all of that stuff. But actually, my second book is coming out in the fall, and it is completely self-published. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And I think that's a great route to go. I was introduced to that by a friend in my writers group about 2008, and he was really pushing it. At the time, it was not as accepted as it is now.
Yeah.
And but he was saying it's going to take years to find an agent, for the agent to find a publisher, and then they may or may not promote your book, and they're going to expect you to do most of the marketing, and they're still going to take most of the royalties.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you going to do all of
Mhm.
that when you could self-publish? Now, one thing I do like to say to anybody thinking of self-publishing is, please write multiple drafts.
Yes. Oh, yes.
You know, and I think that that has changed too. I think when self-publishing started, I mean, you know, speaking of technology evolving, I think people were like, woohoo, I can just throw it out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's become more of an awareness that you really do need to edit it, do the multiple drafts, get a beta reader, maybe hire an editor,
Mhm.
and really put out a polished product. So
Yes.
that is changing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I'm very
so,
lucky. One of my friends, she used to be a teacher. She actually left teaching and she went to school, became a professional editor and opened up her own little company. So she's does all my writing with me. So it's great.
nice.
Yes.
So once you got the book written and you got it published, then we're on to marketing. What is some of your best advice to other writers on that?
Well, I know I'm not alone as a writer when I say this is my least favorite part. And the reality of the world today is that social media is the main place you're supposed to market. So the fact that I was marketing a book against social media on social media was like, the irony is not lost on me. But I
Yes.
have definitely, like, I've learned a lot. I am an elder millennial, so this does not come naturally like it does to a lot of the younger generation.
Hmm.
But I've kind of had fun playing around with some of the videos and, connecting with people and building a little bit of a community. And
Hmm.
I'm pretty lucky that I have students. So I already have an audience kind of built in. So I have a lot of them
Right.
who they help me out. And actually, they're my beta readers. I have a group of girls
Very
who
nice. Uh-huh.
help me with, bringing the Gen Z experience to life.
Hmm.
And, they're so wonderful. So yeah,
Right.
it's tricky. It's a full-time job, I feel like, to do
The
good
marketing.
marketing. Mhm.
Yeah, when I was doing really, really well with my book sales was when I was working 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
And that included, I was teaching music lessons at the
Mhm.
time, about 25 hours a week. All nine of my kids were still home. So that included everything, getting up at 6 to get them, make sure they're getting off to school, through writing and marketing in the morning, going to my job, getting them dinner, getting them to bed at night, and staying up till 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it paid off. It paid off
Mhm.
really well, but you can't keep that up forever. So,
No. And yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with two young kids, teaching
mhm,
full time, just, trying to do your own day-to-day things and
right.
keep your head above water and write
Mhm,
still, because the
yep.
marketing could completely bulldoze through that time when you actually just need to keep writing as well.
Right, right. And that's some of the advice that I've gotten from some of my friends and other people I've talked to whose books sell well enough that they can quit their day job,
Ugh,
is they
the
said,
dream.
right, right. And I was that close to doing it and I slacked off marketing and that was
Mhm.
the end of that. But they said you have to keep putting out books. You know, you're
Yeah.
not going to sell one book forever. And that's kind of where I got stuck, was that I was trying to market and write the next book and keep up with everything else in my
Mhm.
life. And I know people who are cranking out a book every 6 weeks.
Yeah,
It's
that's
insane.
wild. I can't even fathom that.
Right. Well, they're people who are writing sort of more formulaic
Mm.
type of books, and they're just kind of light, fun, humorous reads. Whereas my books, I'm taking research trips to Scotland, I'm delving deep into medieval history.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm cranking out a book every 6 weeks.
No.
So, anyway, where can people find you online?
Yeah. I'm primarily on Instagram and Facebook. It's my handle, I think it is called, is at Tara Hodgson author. And all my links there too are on my page for my books, which are on Amazon, Indigo, Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have a website, correct?
I do, yeah. Just tarahodgson.ca.
Okay. CA
Yeah.
for Canada.
Yeah, I'm Canadian. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've actually had a fair number of Canadian authors on the program.
Hmm.
Peter Sako is on the other coast. You're not quite on the coast, but he's
Not
on
on the
the other end.
coast. Yeah, right
On
landlocked in the prairies.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask people to please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps us grow. It helps us bring more great authors to you whose books you might be excited to read. You can find me at lauravosika.com, VOSIKA. You can find Books and Brews at booksandbrews.net. You can find our sponsor, Gabriel's Horn, at gabrielshornpress.com for those videos where I said gabrielshornbooks.com. Disregard. I don't know why I said that. It's press.com. And if you would like to see our wonderful rabbits and chickens and sheep, you can go to glenmural.wordpress.com. And do you have any upcoming public events people might like to attend?
Well, I am going to just a book fair in Edmonton, Alberta in September. It's like think Scholastic book fair for adults. And all the information is on my Instagram and Facebook, but that's my most recent one coming up.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have 3 authors lined up, and soon there will be a 4th. The next Books and Brews Light will be Karen Dustman writing about Miami's Great Hurricane, September 18th, 1926, which is about a disaster in Florida that her father lived through when he was 10. So I'm excited to see that. We'll be talking with Bob Brill about his book, Lancer, Hero of the West, which is Western fiction. For those in America, I'm kind of making July a little bit of an American theme, so that's why we're getting some things about that. And then the full podcast, we will be talking in just a few days to Donna Massey. Her book is on, what's it called? The Taking. Her book is a very interesting story about UFO abductions. It's a novel, but it gets into how the mother disappears and the impact this has for years on the life of the father and daughter, and then how they come to realize what really happened to her. So I'm in the process of reading that right now and really enjoying it. So thank you very much for being on the program. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.